All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so glad you could join us today as we dive into a really, really fascinating and important topic.
It's going to be a deep one, that's for sure.
You got that right. So we've been kind of wading through Reconstruction these last few episodes, and man, it gets heavy, especially when you think about all the racial violence that erupted after the Civil War.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like all that hope,
Yeah.
and then bam, groups like the Ku Klux Klan start rearing their ugly heads.
It was a backlash, really, a violent attempt to hold on to power and maintain the old order.
Exactly. So to combat that, Congress passed the Anti-KKK Act in 1871.
A landmark piece of legislation, for
Right.
sure. I mean, it's remarkable when you think about the context. This was the federal government stepping in to say, no, we will not tolerate this kind of terror against our citizens.
Right. Talk about a turning point. So this act, it basically gave the federal government the power to prosecute Klan members and anyone else who was trying to prevent, like, newly freed people from exercising their rights.
Exactly. It was designed to enforce the 14th and 15th Amendments, guarantee equal protection, the right to vote.
Which was huge because
Uh-huh.
before that, it was like the Klan was operating with impunity in some places. I mean, think about the level of violence and intimidation. Lynchings, beatings, burning down homes and churches. People were living in fear.
Yeah.
And local law enforcement, well, they were often either powerless to stop it or worse.
Oh, absolutely. There was complicity in many cases.
Yeah.
Local officials, judges, even law enforcement turning a blind eye or even actively participating.
It was a complete breakdown of the rule of law.
Yeah.
But then comes Congressman Benjamin Butler. He was like this fiery advocate for the act. And get this, he said, the federal government must act decisively to protect the rights of all Americans, particularly in regions where state and local governments have failed to do so.
And that quote just perfectly encapsulates the whole struggle, right? The
Mhm.
tension between federal power and states' rights. It was a battle that was playing out all over the South during Reconstruction.
Totally.
Mm.
But it also shows how committed some people were to making Reconstruction a reality. They knew they had to do something drastic.
It was drastic. One of the most controversial parts of the act was that it allowed for the suspension of habeas corpus in certain cases.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, hold up. For our listeners who don't know, what is habeas corpus?
Right. So habeas corpus is basically the right to appear before a judge if you're detained. It's to make sure you're not being held illegally.
Got it.
So suspending it, even in extreme cases, meant the government could detain people without that basic right. It was seen as a necessary measure to combat the Klan, but it definitely raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, that's a tough one, right? Trying to balance safety and security with individual liberties is like walking a tightrope.
Exactly. And that tension between security and freedom is something that we're still grappling with today in different ways.
No doubt. But at the time, even with those concerns, people like Frederick Douglass, the incredible abolitionist,
Yeah.
saw the act as a sign of progress, a beacon of hope. Remember that quote of his?
Oh, many. We are not to be discouraged. Let us hold on to the sheet anchor of the Constitution. Powerful stuff.
Right. It reminds us that this wasn't just a theoretical debate. It was about real people's lives. People were being terrorized and they needed protection.
Absolutely. And for Douglas, the act, flaws and all, represented the possibility of a more just future.
It's heartbreaking, because even with the act in place, enforcing it was a whole other battle.
Well, absolutely. You can't legislate away hate and prejudice, unfortunately.
Sadly, true. And many southern states just flat out resisted the act. Some local officials colluded with the Klan or just looked the other way when they were committing violence.
It shows how deeply entrenched those racist attitudes and structures were. And it highlights a challenge we still face today, the challenge of implementation. It's one thing to pass a law, but actually changing hearts and minds, changing the way things are done, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. And that's a powerful message for us today, I think. The Anti-KKK Act, as imperfect as it was a huge step towards justice.
Definitely. It showed that the federal government was willing to use its power to protect the rights of all its citizens, even when it was difficult.
It really makes you think,
Yeah.
Like what lessons can we learn from the act's successes and its failures? And how can we apply those lessons today to ensure that everyone's rights are protected, that everyone has an equal shot at the American dream?
Big questions, right?
The biggest. But those are the conversations we need to be having, right? So to all our listeners out there, we want to hear from you. How do you think the legacy of the Anti-KKK Act is still relevant today?
Yeah, join the conversation, share your thoughts on our website, hit us up on social media. Let's get this dialogue going.
Absolutely. because these are conversations that matter. Okay, folks, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. As always, thanks for listening.